Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage, Dag Sørås.
Good evening. I appreciate the enthusiasm. Wow. No, single-digit audience once again. Fuck. This fucking festival is not going to go to my head. That's for sure. Yeah. And even if it did, I see that they have free Scientology personality tests. That would bring me back down to earth, you know, ironically enough. No, but thanks for coming out, though. I really do appreciate it. One more week of this shit. And then we're done. Yeah, my name is Dag, and I am a Norwegian. Let's get that out of the way first. And Norway is the best country in the world to live in, according to research done by the UN and people who don't live in Norway. Obviously, I'm not a huge fan myself. Like, I grew up in the northern part, a small city called Narvik, which is a terrible place. It's like the Soviet Union, but without the charm, which doesn't leave it that much. You know, but Norwegians in general are, you know, they're very patriotic people. I've had a bunch of them tell me that, well, you gotta at least be proud to be Norwegian, right? So, not really. I'm about as proud to be Norwegian as I am proud every time water boils at 100 degrees. You know, laws of nature, not really something that I can't take the credit for that stuff, you know. There you go, yeah. I'm mumbling because I'm way too sober to do this right now, but I've struggled with depression for the past couple of years. And it's always made me angry at myself because I have no reason to be depressed, really. Like, my life is pretty good, but coming over here and, you know, staying here for 3 weeks, for the first time in my life, I feel justifiably depressed. You know, like, this makes perfect sense. Just a bleak shithole. It's, you know, it's epic, it's beautiful, yeah, but it's also really fucking depressing. Like, being here is like watching Schindler's List while coming off a coke binge, you know, it's a bit of a bummer. You know, even the fucking weather is manic depressive. You go outside for 15 minutes, it's sunny, it's happy, it's perfect, it's raining, it's depressing, it's sunny, it's happy, it's fucking flooding. Think up your mind, you know, I already have issues. Now the fucking bagpipe players everywhere, the perfect soundtrack for suicide. I might not make it. No, I'm not suicidal, I'm actually a, you know, fairly big fan of life, but I do think people should be allowed to kill themselves if they want to. I am, however, opposed to assisted suicide. I'm opposed to assisted suicide for people that don't want to die. Does that make sense? Yeah, we solved that problem, right? You know, if on the other hand you want to check out from this life without pain, you know, I think you should have the same rights as my dog. I'm like, that makes me some sort of humanitarian. This is gonna be one of those fucking nights. I can already feel it, you know. Luckily for you guys, complete silence is like a standing ovation in my head. This is gonna be a good one. I'm not complaining, you know, by the way. You know, it's awesome to be here and do this festival. I mean, I get up on this stage every night, and that way I won't have to drink alone. You know, it's good for something. And I'm not a pessimist either. You know, I look out at this room and I don't see an empty room. I see a room that's, what, 1/7 full? That's great. You know? I don't mind non-drinkers though, like teetotalers. But I do have a theory that behind every non-drinker there lies a very dark, drunken story. Where somebody got way too fucked up and did some horrible shit and they woke up with a family member or a beloved pet. You know, we've all been there, right? It's a rough morning. The difference is most of us, we don't give up. We keep trying. We fight to live and drink another day. My parents didn't raise a quitter, unfortunately. So there you have it. I was drinking in some sports bar during the soccer world championships, and there was some big game out on the screen, and I was there by myself, and the guy next to me asked me what team I was rooting for. And I said, I don't care. Like, I have no interest in soccer. I'm just here for a beer. And he said that makes you a very boring person. That was his reply. As if my lack of interest in soccer was somehow indicative of a lack of interest in anything. There's plenty of things I'm interested in: history, philosophy, science, music, movies, porn. I love porn, I hate soccer. I like people to sweat for a reason. Right? Anybody can sweat because they're running after a ball like a retard, but if you sweat because you have a big black cock in your face, that takes character. I respect that sweat. I relate to that sweat. I don't know why it has to be a black cock, by the way. Watching porn incessantly for 15 years, it hasn't made me sexist, but it's obviously made me racist. That'd be good. No, I'm not a racist. My set list is. Let's all judge in silence, in preparation of what's to come. That's one of those weird terms, though, you know, when people talk about reverse racism. Reverse racism, of course, is when someone from a minority group discriminates against a majority group. But that's still just racism, right? I mean, if you're a racist, you're an idiot. There's no reverse idiocy just because there's less of you. So what a fucking cop-out, you know? Like, reverse racism is in itself a racist term, but there's so many of these terms that don't make any sense. Like, another one is reverse psychology. Like, you can even hear young people use that term. Like, hear young guys going, "Oh dude, you wanna fuck her? What you gotta do is pretend like you don't wanna fuck her, and that'll make her wanna fuck you even more." It's reverse psychology. Nope, still just basic psychology. People are simple, there's nothing reverse about it, you know. This is reverse humor, though. Yeah, in the sense of only a minority will appreciate it. But, you know, you learn to live with it. I had a gig in Norway once where a woman said to me afterwards, she said, "Why can't you do something that everybody can enjoy?" I said, "What do you want me to do? Should I walk around the room and orally satisfy every audience member? I mean, that would take quite a while and probably leave a bad taste in my mouth. Not that committed. Well, I could probably suck you all off within the hour, and we could all live with some dignity intact, you know." I offered it a couple of days ago, but no, we wanted comedy gold. Sadists. Yeah. But my family, my girlfriend and my son has been over for the last week, which sort of helps my mood, I guess. And like, my son is, he's 2 years old, and being a dad has been fantastic for the past year. The first year is like horrible, and nobody warns you in advance about how hard it's going to be. The first year of being a parent, psychologists have the perfect term. It's called Stockholm Syndrome, right? That's what it's like to be a dad. You tend to get warm feelings for your hostage taker, you know. Then it sort of evens out. But now that he talks and everything, like, we can communicate, it's awesome. Like, just a couple of days ago, we were at some park here in Edinburgh, and like, he enjoys sticking his hands inside his diapers and like pulling his dick all the time. And like, I told him, that's fine when we're at home, you know, but you can't do that stuff in public. And his reply was, I swear to God, his reply was, "I want to go home right now." His first completely, perfectly formed sentence, you know, and such a fucking rational one. I hailed the first taxi I saw, you know, got encouraged. But I had while my girlfriend was pregnant, I had a friend of mine tell me that, he said, you know, once you have a child, you're going to change your stance when it comes to abortions. Like he said, you're going to go from being pro-choice to pro-life. And wow, he really couldn't have been more way off, you know. Once I had a kid, I'm even more pro-abortion than I used to be. And I was fairly liberal to begin with, you know. And I'm not saying that just to be an asshole. I mean, you know, I'm saying that I realize now that, you know, it takes a lot of commitment to raise a decent person. If you do a half-assed job, you're going to raise a Tory, and, you know, the world wept, right? Anybody in here ever have an abortion? I don't know, gender of people here. I feel like we've broken the ice already. Well, here's my story. 7 years ago, I had a girlfriend. She became pregnant. There was no way we were going to stay together, so we decided to have an abortion. And like, I remember telling my parents, I sat them down, and I said, "Mom, Dad, me and my girlfriend were going to have an abortion. You know, what's for dinner, right? I mean, I hope it's not eggs. That would just fuck with my head. But my dad got really upset. My dad actually started yelling at me, and what he yelled was, "No, dog, you cannot be party to an abortion. You're gonna regret it." But then my mom started yelling at my dad, and what she yelled was, "What the hell are you talking about? You wanted to have him aborted." Me. My dad wanted to have me aborted. That's good news, you know? It's a happy ending. I'm still here to entertain, bring some sunshine to the world. But the weird thing is, like, my mother had made the appointment to have me, scraped out. But she changed her mind at the last second. I still don't know why, but the appointment was made, and she changed her mind at the last second. Yeah, so I guess that's my near-death experience. And nothing flashed before my eyes. For a reason, I guess. You know when you can sense that you're about to go into self-destructive mode? You're so glad you're not really drunk, because that would just fuck this up. Stay on script, asshole. Yeah, I don't know. The thing is, though, once you have a child, you have something invested in the future. You know, you gotta at least pretend like you care about what happens to the planet and us as a species. But as a species, I think we might be fucked. You know, or if not fucked, at least fingered. At the very best, we're fingered as a species. Because, I mean, just look at if you look at the global warming debate, like, at any given time, 50% of people in any country will tell you that they don't believe in man-made global warming. As if it's a belief issue. You know, like, I have no expertise whatsoever, but I see no reason to question the overwhelming scientific consensus on man-made global warming. But it takes nothing for people to change their minds. Like, we had a cold winter, right? And so many people said, well, it's cold outside. Global warming, gotta be bullshit. Well, of course, you gotta realize that there's a difference between climate and weather. You know, the weather is the local thing you see right outside your window. Climate is the global thing. So you're looking outside your window and denying global warming because it's cold outside. It's like me denying that there's a global food crisis just because I'm a fat bastard. No, I'm full, what's the problem? I'm fucking stuffed in my face with KFC while I'm shitting out McDonald's. Why would anybody starve? I'm a narcissist. Yeah, that's the problem. Yeah. Like when you look at the prognosis for what's going to happen to this planet, it almost makes me wish I was religious. If I honestly believe that, the world ending in Armageddon would lead to an eternity with Jesus, why would I even recycle? It's a pain in the ass, and it probably doesn't help. If I can do something. I just think religious people have all their priorities screwed up. Like in Norway, we also have a constitutional state church, which means that most people have their kids baptized. And the child will become a member of the church against its will, probably. But that's fine, right? But I refused, and my father-in-law went crazy. Like, he really took offense. And what he said to me was, "You're not going to baptize your own son? Do you really want your own child to end up in hell?" I said, "Of course I do. I want him to be with his mom and dad." I mean, the fucking stupidity of the argument notwithstanding, what's wrong with wanting to spend time with your own flesh and blood? I think that makes me the good parent, right? Fucking committed. I used to be a Christian. I used to read the Bible every fucking night. I read the book like several times. But even as a believer, I could never understand why Jesus felt the need to always point out that he was the Son of God. Since the whole point of Christian doctrine seemed to be that we are all God's children. So when Jesus said that he was the Son of God, sort of like Jesus going, "Yeah, we're all God's children, but I'm the favorite." Then you wonder why he got crucified. He got crucified for being an arrogant prick. Okay, like my younger brother, he was a favorite when we grew up, and if I had, nails, a hammer, some wood, and I wasn't such a lazy cunt, he'd be in a lot of trouble. He'd be screaming for his dad in vain. Yeah. I still love, my favorite movie of all time is probably The Passion of the Christ, just an anti-Semitic masterpiece. And I went to the premiere at the cinema, and in Norway, like, the Christians really mobilized. after the movie, they were handing out flyers, much like the people handing out flyers at this festival, but the Christians actually had hope in their eyes. Fucking idiots, right? But anyway, a woman offered me a flyer, and I said, no thanks. And then she went, well, weren't you in there watching the Passion? I go, yeah. And then she said, well, then you know, Jesus died for you. So I go, first of all, you know that's just a movie, right? You can't possibly take this shit seriously. And second of all, you know, I don't know if there was a second point even, but Jesus didn't die for me, he died before me. Right? Semantic difference. A lot of people fall in that trap. Stepping on my own punchlines. The thing that even offends me as a, even as, just a rational human being is when people say that Jesus was the first socialist. That makes, no sense. I mean, read the story when Jesus is visiting some family, and the woman of the household, she pours a whole barrel of oil over Jesus. And her husband actually asks her, he goes, why are you wasting all this oil on Jesus? Like, we have a lot of poor people in this neighborhood. They could use that oil. And Jesus, the big socialist, his reply was, I am only here for today. The poor people will be here every day. Is that socialist Jesus? No, that's fucking Tory Jesus. That's vicious, poor people, cocksucker, hating Jesus. That's just a bad person, right? Threw a cocksucker in there for some reason. I don't know if that even made any sense. In Northern Norway we call everybody cocksuckers. But it's not meant in a homophobic way at all, Like, I have no... In Northern Norway, there's a difference between a cocksucker and someone who sucks cock. Like, I have no problem with people who suck cock at all. Actually, some of the most amazing people I've ever met. Some of the people that made the most lasting impression on me, they suck cock. God, nature bless them. But a cocksucker is just a vicious person. So yeah, my girlfriend sucks cock and the queen is a cocksucker. Right? Maybe the queen is a cocksucker who sucks cock. I haven't pried into her personal business. Fucking sweating. Like, is this room even... it's like a David Lynch movie. Most nights. It really is. I'm waiting for some fucking midget to walk in and say something incomprehensible. I can leave. I'm not just bashing on Christians, by the way. Like, I'm not a fan of any religion. Like, I had a gig once, and a guy snuck up behind me after the show, and he punched me in the shoulder. And the first thing he said was, I am a Muslim. Which is a strange introduction. And what am I even supposed to say back? I'm a Muslim. I told him, I'm really, really sorry. That's a tremendously sad story. It's concise, but it brought a tear to my eye. Really sad story, but fortunately the mental health care system in Norway is pretty decent, so we'll put you on a diet of Richard Dawkins books and, get you some critical thinking skills and have you over on our side before you know it. But yeah, he took offense. He said, I know I'm a Muslim, I have faith. No, you have a fucking diagnosis. That's what you have. Like, religiosity, being religious is the only mental illness where it's actually socially acceptable to try to convert other people to your brand of insanity. That never happens with other mental illnesses. You never have fucking schizophrenics knocking down your door every Sunday trying to get you to come to a meeting. Yeah, we also have voices in our heads. They're not gods, but still. Sign up, I gotta say, I almost envy schizophrenics. If you're schizophrenic, your girlfriend can never accuse you of drinking alone. It's always Tommy and Frank. It's a party in there. I don't even know if the mental health care system in Norway is that good. Like, I had to see my doctor, like my regular physician. I had to talk to him about my depression and social anxiety. And he said to me, well, you need a psychiatrist. I said, fine, how do we proceed? And then he said, well, you got to write a page-long letter where you explain all your problems. And then we'll send that letter out to different psychiatrists, and we'll see who will have you. I got to go on a fucking audition to get mental. Did I mention that social anxiety was one of my problems? Guess not. Why the fuck am I doing this? I have no idea. That's why I numb the pain. Yeah, but I really think we need to start treating, you know, bullshitters, people who spew bullshit. We need to start treating those people the same way that we treat today's smokers, where we just make them social outcasts. So if you have a friend and he comes over to your apartment and he starts praising, you know, Cameron or God, you just tell him, seriously, you have to take this shit outside and close the door after you. I have a kid sleeping here, you're poisoning my whole environment. This will not stand. Yeah. So yeah, no God, no big surveillance camera in the sky. We do make up for it though with surveillance cameras on the street. Like the UK, you're the pioneers of mass surveillance, and in Norway we're not too far behind. It's creepy to see people's attitudes. Like, we're so willing to give away our privacy for the illusion of safety. And like, fairly, you know, I have smart friends who, when it comes to surveillance, they just bring out the worst cliches. Like, one of them told me, well, Doug, the thing about surveillance is, if you're not doing anything wrong, you have nothing to be afraid of. I just go, you know me as a person. You know I don't do a lot of stuff that's wrong. But I do some illegal stuff. I don't want that shit caught on tape. Drugs, prostitution, midget tossing, that shit's against the law, right? I don't want those tapes surfacing when I decide to run for prime minister or, you know, emperor or head of my residents association. It's gonna hurt my cause, you know? Another one of those cemetery nights. It's beautiful. Thing is though, if there were a bunch of rotting corpses, you know, if the room were filled with rotting corpses, they would have an excuse to just stare at me, you know. But I don't blame you, I really don't. Take my word for it. I know it gets awkward in here. You guys do drugs? Yeah, there's just no common ground here, is there? The only thing we have in common is that we all hate my act. Right? That's something to bond over. I'll be the fucking spokesperson for the group. Like I think like 4 reviews since I got here, and 3 of them have been good, but I got really slaughtered in the fest. I got like a 2 out of 5 stars by a Norwegian journalist, I think. Yeah, perfect. But the review was so well written that in the end, like, I had total I agreed with it. Not only did I agree with the reviewer, I thought she was too nice. I was like, no, this is probably a 1-star show. It really does suck. You know, it's tedious and it's. But the thing is, she accused me of being, like, the start of the review. She said that I seemed uncomfortable on stage, and she ended the review by saying that I was nonchalant. How the fuck do you combine a lack of self-confidence with arrogance? I don't know. Might as well have called me a fucking compassionate conservative. You know, once you gotta go for the oxymorons, knock yourself out. Yeah. Yeah, drugs. I did the Brighton Fringe Festival in May. And I ran into a drug-sniffing dog at the train station who took quite the liking to me. We had a good thing going. I was petting him. I liked him, you know, until his partner showed up and wanted to go through my bag for some reason. I smelled of weed. That was it. And the cop was actually pretty cool. He said to me, have you done drugs today? I said, no. And then he went, have you ever done drugs? And before I could even answer, he just said, of course you have. That's a good person. You know, he should have been a psychologist or something. But either way, he didn't find anything on me, but he gave me a note which explained that he had stopped me under the power of the Misuse of Drugs Act. You know, in my head, I just thought to myself, you know, I didn't misuse any drugs. I used the exact right drug for the exact right occasion. Like in this instance, I had a good gig in Brighton. Somebody offered me a joint afterwards. I smoked it. Misusing the drug would have been sticking the joint up my ass or not inhaling. That would have been misusing drugs, but you know, there you go. And the thing is, like, if you do a good drug, all you're really doing is you're expanding your mind. You know? So if you're against legalizing drugs, you're against people expanding their minds, and that makes you pro-mind control and by definition a fascist. Which is my only message here tonight. Yeah, probably a fascist. Yeah. Somebody actually offered me I've seen two, like, you know when you see one of those sites that just brings back your hope for humanity. I was leaving my, a couple of weeks ago, must have been the start of the festival, I was leaving my apartment / prison cell to come do this gig. I was walking up Nicholson Street and there was an old couple in front of me. And, you know, they looked really old, like they were holding hands though, and the guy had a cane. And as I approached them from behind, I even realized, well, they even smell nice. You know, they don't smell like old people. But as I passed them, I could see that they were both sharing a spliff. They were smoking a big joint, you know, in the middle of the street. And that, you know, I don't usually interact with strangers, but I just had to give them the thumbs up and go, you guys rock, you really do. That's a beautiful sight. Old, happy, fucked up people. That brightens my hope for the future, you know. It's not going to be so bad. And then you know, a couple of nights later, somebody offered me to sell me cocaine. The street right outside and then to the left, in case you need directions, you know. But I said no. I said I'm broke and I don't really do hard drugs anymore. But thanks for offering. And then I had to say to him, you're offering me coke. Thanks for pointing out the fact that it looks like I probably need a bump at this point, you know. I gotta go get stared at by 4 strangers at the stand. I could use the fucking illusion of confidence at this point. Getting up here every night in a room that's really not conducive to comedy, is it? This is more like a corporate gig, right? It feels like a fucking perfect setting for an AA meeting. Hey, my name's Dag, and this isn't gonna work out. Now, so weed is, you know, pretty much the only drug I can do these days because I don't trust my own mind. And, you know, why it's not legal yet is just beyond anybody. I mean, like in Norway, the only argument that the people who are opposed to legalizing weed have left is the ancient one about weed leading to harder drugs. And I go, how do you know? And they say, well, you know, 90% of the people who are on heroin started with weed. Well, first of all, they probably started with mother's milk. So let's not get crazy here. You know, I don't think the chances of you dying with a needle in your arm increase exponentially by you sucking on your mother's tit as a kid. You know, I hope not. But even if it's true, how do you know that there's a correlation between heroin and weed? You know, I mean, Hitler was a vegetarian. Is there a correlation between abstaining from eating meat for ethical reasons and genocide? I don't know. Maybe it is, but yeah. Yeah, you know. Then again, you know, my girlfriend is a vegetarian and quite the Nazi when it comes to me. When it comes to me smoking weed. So yeah, there you go. Yeah. Hitler. You know, this is when Tony Blair stepped down. I guess Tony Blair is getting some Peace Prize now, maybe he got one. But when Tony Blair stepped down as Prime Minister and the UN made him envoy for peace in the Middle East, my first thought was, seriously, Hitler shouldn't have killed himself. You know, if Hitler just stuck it out and hung in there, maybe Hitler could have gotten a great job. Maybe Hitler could have become, I don't know, Prime Minister of Israel. Yeah. He wouldn't have to change any of his foreign policy. Just keep attacking and pretend like you're under attack. You know, that's the thing with kids still playing cowboys and Indians. It's so outdated. I mean, if you're going to base a children's game on genocide, you should update it to more recent history so maybe the child will learn something. So, you know, your kid comes running to you going, Mommy, Mommy, why do I always have to be the Jew when we play Nazis versus the Jews? You get them back later, kiddo, when it's Israelis versus the Palestinians. And remember not to see the irony. Very important, because historical amnesia is the way of God's chosen people. Yeah. I can't criticize Israel, by the way, because I am circumcised. I'm not Jewish, but you know, my foreskin was too tight when I was a kid, so now I'm circumcised. And I feel like that makes me a more astute critic of the Holy State. really? Did I lose you on that one? Wow. This guy. And of course the separation wall that Israel is building. Well, the 650 kilometers long, 8 meters high brick wall with electronic surveillance and armed guards. Israel calls that a fence. Yeah, perfect. You know, just last year we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin fence. That was a great day. Fucking yeah. Is it true that you can see the Great Fence of China from outer space? Keep hearing these rumors. Have you been to Jerusalem? Visited the Wailing Fence? The sound. This is what I hear in my head when I sleep. Fucking ventilation system signaling my comedy death. 1 week. Actually, it's not 1 week. It's more like 6 days, right? Doesn't matter. I did call this show Outside the Comfort Zone, and you know, I didn't really know why, but now I do. I just needed a fucking title, and I figured, hey, it's gonna get uncomfortable. There you go. I was referring to the heat, but you know, really. No, but I do think it's weird, like the social contract that we have created for ourselves as a society, it just excludes any type of honesty. You know, like you're at some, like if you're at a party with strangers, people will tell you to avoid talking about religion or politics because it's considered rude. Well, maybe it is, but then again, your religious and political views say a lot about you as a human being. Probably one of the first things we should talk about to see if we're even like compatible. To see if we're even on the same planet. But no, still, people want to waste their time on small talk. On average, we live less than 1,000 months. That's not so long, and you want to waste it on small talk with strangers? I don't get it. You know. But of course, I can't introduce myself to a stranger the way I want to. I can't walk up to you and, you know, and go, yeah, my name's Dag, there's no God, and Cameron's a crypto-fascist. You know. Because if I did, that would be considered rude. And a potential conversation is going to remain a monologue with me screaming in the corner, much like this gig. Fucking small talk. And when people say, don't you hate uncomfortable silences during small talk? No. The silence is generally the most comfortable part of small talk. I don't care about your astrological sign or your fucking what football team you root for. I want to know your darkest secrets. But I am, you know, I'm the odd man out, of course. Like, I don't even feel the need for, I mean, we are social animals, and human beings feel the need to come together in groups and just, you know, bond over common, you know, values and common ideals and soccer teams, and I don't feel that need. Like I have a fairly serious stomach disease. It's like a colon infection. It's nothing contagious, and I'm doing fine, thank God, right? But, you know, it means at worst, like, if I have a bad day, I shit blood. That's what happens. Like, I'll eat a banana, and 15 seconds later, blood squirts out. But when I got the diagnosis, but, by the way, anybody in there ever have a colonoscopy? No, you would remember if you had. And even if you didn't want to admit it, you would go, oh, fuck. Yeah, that's when they stick a camera up your ass to see what your intestines look like. And they went all the way up here with me, and yeah, rough day. And of course, the doctor that I got, he was sort of a, you know, comedian wannabe. So he was watching some screen, right? Stuck the camera up my ass, watched the screen, and then he said to me while I'm laying on the table, he said, "This doesn't look good. Here, take a look." And then he rolled the screen right up in front of my face, and I went, "I really don't want to see this right now." But he kept pushing. I go, I really don't want to see my filthy fucking insides at this point. Let's just get through this. But he kept pushing. He pushed me until the point where I had to go, can't you just burn me a fucking DVD? And you know, I'll have a beer and I'll watch it later when I'm a little less tense. Because this is already, you know, awkward enough. But here's a word of advice. Never offend a man if he has something up your ass. He really has the power of that situation, you know. But the point was, he gave me the diagnosis, you know, and then he said, but then he said, I can sign you up for a support group where you can meet people who have the same disease. And I thought, that's just perfect. I have enough of a hard time keeping a conversation going with my neighbor if I just happen to run into him in the hallway. You're gonna put me in a room with a bunch of strangers where the only thing we have in common is that we sometimes bleed from the ass. Fucking uncomfortable silence is coming up. There you go. You know. But you know, once again, I do feel, you know, I do understand the need. Like, people feel the need to come together, whether it's around, you know, Manchester United or Jesus or a bleeding anus. You know, there's just aesthetic differences, and barely even that. You know? It's just this. Yeah. Time flies when you think your opinion matters, right? But I do feel like I have a pretty, you know, I think I know my place in the world. Like, you know, like I'm a big heavy metal fan, and I was watching an interview with the bassist from an American band called Drowning Pool, and he was asked, how do you feel about the fact that your band's music has been used to torture people in Iraq and Afghanistan? Like, his band's music, it basically been the soundtrack for torture. For US troops. And his reply was, I am proud. I am proud to know that my band's music has been used to prevent another 9/11. And that made me think, wow, this is a man with perspective on what he's doing. You know, when he gets all fucked up and goes into the studio to churn out some mediocre music, he's not doing it for himself. No, he's doing it to prevent another mindless massacre. That's actually why I do stand-up. I do this to prevent the Germans from invading us again. Right? Because I'm a tiny idiot with a Napoleon complex. I know exactly what I'm doing. I drink and then I call it art. You know, I wouldn't call myself just a drunk, but if you call yourself an artist, it's actually tax deductible in Norway. You know, so I am willing to lie for money. So I should do well in the job market once this comedy dream of mine dies. Yeah. It's weird how people will rationalize their behavior. Like in Norway, we have a conscription army, but I've always been fascinated by how in America, like you have young guys joining the army, young people joining the army to get college money. They say, yeah, I want to join the army so that I can study afterwards. And how do you justify that to yourself? You know, yeah, I joined the American army, went through basic training where I was, you know, indoctrinated into believing that every enemy of the US state is somehow inferior. Then I was shipped over to Iraq where I slaughtered women and children for 2 years. But this was all just so that I could fulfill my dream of studying ethics. That's a study group I'll join. You know, we gotta do. And Obama. A lot of people are disappointed by Obama. I don't really get it. Like, I mean, he ran on a platform of change, and I think he's made some changes. You know, Obama's, for instance, he has expanded the US military budget to unprecedented heights. Right? He has expanded the war in Afghanistan to include Pakistan. That's change, right? I mean, it's not good change, but he never specified positive change on his campaign. Stop busting his balls, right? But of course, after after 8 years of the Bush administration and their arrogant imperialism, it is good to have the United States back to what it does best, which is charming imperialism. Mass murder with a smile. Perfect. You know, fucking Obama being elected president, it took care of the race issue, not just in America, but in the world. Because we now live in a world where we pretend as if a black mass murderer is a lot better than a white one. That's got to be reversed something, right? And Obama has ended the war on terror. Or it hasn't really ended it, but he's changed the name, right? Now it's called Overseas Contingency Operations. You know, catchy. But that's sort of a nice move, though. Instead of changing the actual policies, you just change the name and the rhetoric surrounding the policies. Which, when you think about it, is sort of what the US did when they ended slavery as well. Like they said to the slaves, you're now free, nobody owns you. Now get out there and get a fucking job and become a wage slave like the rest of us. You know? Nobody will own you, but you will have to rent yourself out. There's a lot more dignity in that. No, not really. You know, the people who defended slavery, they had good arguments. They said, if I own somebody, I'm going to treat them better than if I have to rent them. It's a good point. There's a reason you always hear about rock and roll stars chucking TVs out of hotel windows, not their own fucking apartments. You know? What do you treat best? Something you rent or something you own? What do you treat best? Your own car or a rental? Your girlfriend or a prostitute? I don't know. I don't mean to imply that you own your girlfriend. Whatever. Just desperate for a chuckle at this point. And Obama has attacked Yemen, of course, which made perfect sense. He had to attack Yemen because of what happened last Christmas. The pants bomber, like the underpants bomber, tried to blow up a plane. Wasn't that his name? Pants bomber.
Underwear bomber, yeah.
Underwear bomber. Oh, okay. Well, I thought pants bomber was more catchy, but you know, everyone's a critic, right? No, the point was, you had a Nigerian who had been radicalized in Britain, who tried to blow up an American plane in the Netherlands. Of course, you want to bomb Yemen. Like, I don't know if there's a Nobel Prize in geography, but I'm pretty sure Obama has a room on his shelf who won more award that he doesn't deserve. And of course, the big hype these days is the fact that he's going to end the occupation of Iraq. Which again, it's not really true. Like by the end of August, the occupation will be ended. No, there's still going to be 50,000 US troops left. Now, of course, at most, the US had well over 150,000 troops in Iraq, so they're definitely downscaling the occupation, but they're really just withdrawing 2/3 of their troops. Is that ending the occupation? You know, if I rape you anally, and then I withdraw 2/3 of my cock, is your ass not occupied? Does that make any sense? You know? Fucking, sorry I have to reduce complex political issues to cock jokes, but people laugh at the words, so there you go. I aim to please. But Afghanistan, of course, that's still the good war, right? I think so. And such a good war, even Norway is a part of that. And the Norwegian media will tell you that the foreign troops are there to secure democracy. Even though all the polls in Afghanistan show that a majority of Afghans want the foreign troops to leave, the foreign troops say we can't leave because we have to secure democracy. And that is not considered ironic for some reason, you know. If I had fucking George Orwell in the room, he would fucking laugh at that one, but the rest of us, no, we're gonna bring you majority rule. We don't care what the majority thinks. Perfect. Bring him democracy. There was an instance, you know, when WikiLeaks released all those, the Afghan war logs, there was an instance in one of them where some Norwegian troops had supposedly shot and killed an unarmed and deaf Afghan farmer. And of course the Norwegian army had to defend themselves, and what they said was, that never happened. And that never happened because none of our troops have any recollection of it ever happening. Which really is the level of evidence that you want in a criminal prosecution, right? Did you kill your wife? I can't even remember. Clearly innocent. Clearly innocent. A bit callous, but innocent nonetheless. You know. That's the thing, though. You know, when like it's for Norwegians at least, it's voluntary to go over to Afghanistan, and they're mainly kids, you know. So when one of them dies, of course it's a tragedy. But like a bunch of troops have been interviewed in the papers, and they've consistently said the same things. They said they've been asked, "Why do you go over to Afghanistan?" And they say, "Well, because it pays well and because it's exciting." But when one of them dies, suddenly they died to secure democracy. People go, "He died for what he believed in." Yeah, he probably did. Money. That's why he died. You know, just be honest about your intentions. I mean, I went over to Afghanistan in 2006 to entertain Norwegian troops. Yeah, I fucking almost stumbled on the word entertain for a reason. That was a rough gig, you know. Like, you remember the movie The Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis? You had a kid who could see dead people, didn't know that they were dead. Exactly how I felt on stage in Afghanistan. That was a real cemetery. And it was me and one other comic, and wherever we were being transported around, we had to be transported in armored vehicles. But I figured that was just because the Afghans wanted us to be there. You know. Sometimes I go over my own head. It doesn't matter. But, you know, just imagine if I had said that, you know, I did, well, my intentions for going over was they would pay me, and it was a chance to see a country that really fascinates me, that I wouldn't get the chance to see if I didn't take this gig. You know, I'm not going to get my girlfriend to agree to a weekend in Kabul for fairly obvious reasons, you know. But imagine if I had died, God forbid, you know, robbing the fucking planet though. Well, at least smiles, right? Yeah. Yeah. If I'd said I died because I tried to bring them laughter. You know. Yeah. But of course, yeah, you know, like David Beckham went over to boost the morale of British troops in May. That was a classic. Like he said, I think it was to the Sun. He said, "I have defended my country on the soccer field, but what these guys are doing is something completely different." No shit, David. Ever the spokesperson for the obvious. That's great. But then he was asked. A journalist asked him, "If you weren't a soccer player, would you have joined the army?" And he said, "Definitely," which, you know, must have made the British troops feel so good. David Beckham going, "If I weren't a multi-millionaire, I'd be cannon fodder just like you guys. Cheer up. Doing it for me and my fucking freedom." Yeah. I'm just fascinated by the fact that we still have such an imperial mentality in the West. Like, we can criticize the Afghans because they don't share our values and they treat women like shit. Well, that's all probably true, but what nobody seems to be talking about is the fact that according to the Afghan calendar, they have their own calendar, we are now in the year 1390. 1390, let me ask you, how progressive were we in the West 600 years ago? I mean, speaking for Norway, 600 years ago, we were burning women alive at the stake, calling them witches. In Afghanistan, they stone women. Now, I'm not condoning stoning by any stretch of the imagination, but at least it's environmentally friendly. You know? Global warming, still real, people. I think Al Gore should have shared his Nobel Peace Prize with the Taliban. Thanks for coughing in the only fucking good joke I have. Jesus. Sorry, was that you, Phil? No problem. Pure hate speech without the pretense of a punchline even. There you go. I'm just so, you know, it just annoys me, the reputation that fucking pig has, you know? Fucking mad. The last time I was in New York, I was pretty drunk. I was going to the airport. I was going to JFK airport, so I tried to be funny, and I said to the taxi driver, I said, "Take me to a mass murderer airport." But he didn't find that funny at all, because history was not his thing. You know? So it's just so hard to find role models, you know. The only one who's even inspired me lately was in Texas, a man called Joseph Stack. I don't know if anybody heard of this. He stole a small airplane and then he crashed it into the IRS building in Texas, like the tax authorities. That's a fucking hero. He's like me, but with balls. You know, I just talked the talk, he fucking flew the plane. He did it. That's great. He got fucked over one too many times. He saw the big bailout to the banks. He saw his 80-year-old neighbor living on cat food. He had enough. He wrote a great suicide note. I don't know if you're readers. It's 5 pages long, but I fucking keep it framed by my bedstand, you know, highlighted for when I feel uninspired. That's a hero. And what all the media denunciation, what they seem to overlook was the fact that the the building that he crashed into, it wasn't just the IRS, it was the IRS and the CIA in the same building. That's just too fucking perfect. Come on. Like if you had a building here with the BNP and the MI5 in the same building, just give me a bottle of whiskey and the most basic flying skills, and I'll show you that I mean what I'm saying. Matter of fact, let's all steal a plane right now, crashing into a building, end this fucking show on a high note, get some adrenaline going, get me a 3-star review. The show ended abruptly, but it seemed necessary at the time. My drug dealer. Perfect. Yeah. That's a hero. But he's dead now. Fucking Joseph Stack, dead and gone, never coming back. My hero. Never coming back. So now I know how the Christians feel. I had to rush that punchline before I forgot. Double liquid confidence. They've been quiet tonight, Eric. It's one of those nights. You know. We're about to leave, no problem. I just thought I had some sort of fucking semblance of a red thread, but I forgot. You know. But I don't think Joseph Stack is coming back because I don't think there's life after death. It seems unlikely. My girlfriend believes in life after death, and she actually suggested that we could make a bet about who's right. I almost fell for it until I realized, how the fuck am I going to get my money? But no matter how you die of natural causes. That needs to be pointed out. Like, you ever hear that? People say he died, but he died of natural causes. Yeah, what's the alternative? Dying of unnatural causes? How would that look? You know, no matter how you die, it's natural. Like if you get hit by a drunk driver, it's natural. A lot of people suck. You know? If you get hit by a fucking tsunami, nature is trying to get rid of you. Doesn't get any more natural than that. Have you guys seen Mr. Hands on the internet? The guy who gets fucked to death by a horse? Oh, it's awesome. Just promise me this. When you get home tonight, just Google Mr. Hands plus fucked to death by horse. He'll take you straight to the Encyclopedia of Stupidity, click on the Windows Media link, and just fucking laugh your asses off. It's hilarious. It's unnaturally funny, but it's still a natural death. You know? Because the guy wanted to die. His dream was to get fucked to death by a horse. So it's not really murder, it's more suicide by horse cock, which is just admirable, you know? That's awesome. What a fucking hero, you know? Still a natural death, though. No matter how you die, fucking God himself came down from the sky and bludgeoned you to death for being gay. Yeah, still be a natural death. Be it surprising. Still natural. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, Mr. Hands, though. You know, when I watched that guy get fucked to death by a horse, it really made me like reconsider my stance on sex with animals. Because I don't know where I stand now. Like really, everything I talked about tonight, I have, fairly strong convictions. But when it comes to sex with animals, I can really see the gray area. Like there's certain animals I realize that we shouldn't fuck. Like we shouldn't fuck dogs because we have a cultural relationship with dogs. We shouldn't fuck cats because they're just too hard to catch. But like pigs, think about pigs. Why, if you're not a vegetarian, why shouldn't you be allowed to fuck a pig? We eat pigs, we slaughter pigs, we torture them. I want the right to make love to whatever I eat. If I don't have that right, democracy means nothing. A couple of years ago in Sweden, there was a big case. A guy fucked a horse. He did a reverse Mr. Hands, right? Guy fucked a horse. And all the animal rights people were up in arms. I'm a friend of the animals, but if you fuck a horse, what's the worst that's gonna happen? Maybe you'll wake the horse up. You gotta be pretty well equipped. You gotta have a fairly big dick if you're gonna do serious damage to a horse. You're just bragging at this point, right? So, who's the victim? Guy fucking a horse. The horses have boring lives. The guy came. Who's the victim? So yeah, I don't know. Sex with animals, yes, no, I don't know. Sex with dead animals, on the other hand, I am crystal clear. Go for it. If anybody in here wants to fuck a dead animal by the end of the show, I'll fucking cheer you on as long as there's a bar. Go for it. Because really, what's the harm? Like I read this is a true story. Once again, a 25-year-old man from Wisconsin fucked a dead deer. You know, Google this one as well. But please erase your fucking Google history after this one. You know, fucked a dead horse, fucked a dead deer. This is a sick mind. Yeah, it is. But you know, it's. It keeps me entertained. A guy fucked a dead deer, right? And he was caught. He got caught by the police. And he's convicted as a sexual felon, and he's under forced psychiatric evaluation. Now, first, I can completely understand why the guy would need psychiatric evaluation. But, prison time on top of that? The guy was caught with his cock in a cadaver. You don't need prison on top of that. The humiliation is plenty, I would imagine. I mean, when I was 5, I caught my parents fucking. Like, I went into the bedroom, there they were. And my dad yelled at me. He got really annoyed. He yelled, "What's your problem, kid? Don't you knock before you enter a room?" I just thought to myself, I'm already traumatized for life by watching your fat ass pound my mother missionary style. I don't need you yelling at me on top of that. But luckily it didn't leave a permanent scar, thank God. But so I have sympathy for the deer fucker in Wisconsin, because all the news story said was he was on his way home from a party. That's all he said, and he found that deer. I can connect the dots. He probably came home from a party, he was really drunk, really lonely, tried to fuck a bunch of people, nobody would. He was extremely open-minded. He saw a chance and he took it. Land of opportunity, right? Where's the, what's the problem? And he didn't kill the deer first. Like, if he had killed the deer and then fucked it, yeah, you could make some sort of moral argument that he did something wrong. But he just found a dead deer, and he could have done anything else to the corpse. Nobody would have cared. Like, he could have, he could have taken a piss on the dead deer. Nobody would have cared. He could have given it a humanist burial. Nobody would have cared. He could have eaten the fucking thing. Nobody would have cared. But he stuck his cock in it. Sexual felon? Where do you draw the line? As a society, where do you draw the line? What if he had only fingered the deer? Would we still point our, admittedly, cleaner fingers at him with looks of derision? These are the deep philosophical questions keeping me up at night. And yeah, that's my fucking big closer. And that's the only thing. That's the only thing I've got going for myself. Is self-awareness. Every one of you in here, at some point, you read a crazy news story. You thought a crazy thought, and you thought to yourself, "Why am I the only one thinking this? And does me thinking this make me a sick person?" There's only one way to find out. Get up on stage in front of 11 strangers, tell them exactly what you're thinking for an hour, and you'll soon find out. You're the only one thinking this, and apparently it makes you a sick bastard. But that's fine, just pass it on. Thanks for coming out, people, I really do appreciate it. Take care, have a good night.
Cheers. Break down.